the tragic, murderous rampage at Bondi Junction. 6 people have died, 5 women and 1 man. The killer was shot dead by police at the scene. And as we go to air, 12 people are being treated in hospital, including a 9-month-old baby. The mass killer has been identified as 40-year-old Queensland man Joel Couchy. New South Wales police say there is no evidence the attack was terrorism related, and it appeared to be linked to Couchy's mental health. James, I feel like across Sydney yesterday, in fact, across Australia and the world, it was very difficult to comprehend the gravity of this situation. And we haven't really stopped in our tracks like this since the Lindt Cafe Siege, where you're just trying to piece together what's occurred and what's gone on. And to hear the stories of people calling their loved ones, hiding behind retail stores, calling their loved ones to say, Mum, Dad, I think I could die.
I was actually flying back to Sydney yesterday afternoon from Queensland. And as our flight was taking off, I was on Twitter and reading news about it, as were people around me. And the conversation in the aircraft was surreal because people got just enough information to know there'd been a mass murder at Bondi Shopping Centre without getting any more details. And then we were in the air and people were talking about it the whole flight, trying to work out what is going on. And it was that surreal feeling of things that you just don't associate with Australia.
No.
We're used to seeing it and reading about it overseas, but not here. And so it wasn't until a couple of hours later when we landed that people were straight out with their phones trying to work out what had happened, making calls to people they knew who lived in eastern Sydney. And so it really was like a bad dream. And here we are, 24 hours later, and it's still feels quite surreal what has happened, and I imagine will so for weeks.
Well, absolutely, and I think that police have said they're still trying to piece together exactly what happened. I think a bad dream is probably the best analogy. But the timing of it, James, when you think about it, Bondi Junction is one of the busiest shopping centres in Sydney. It was packed. It's a Saturday afternoon, so the most retail trade going in at the time, but also not to mention school holidays. So multiple children were there at the scene. And then as we start getting these details in, we find out that a 9-month-old infant, a 9-month-old has been stabbed, and her mother, as we know, has tragically passed away. But when we think about the children that were there at the time, they've witnessed the most horrific things that no child ever should ever have to witness. And we saw this vision, and I believe we've got this vision of a father who was walking out of Bondi Shopping Centre. Here it is, and he actually shielded his children's eyes with a mask to protect them.
Yeah, I mean, the first horrific part of this was as you said, a baby was stabbed. I mean, it's impossible to get your head around that. But then you forget about kids like these who we're watching right now, who were in the shopping centre, and you've got, you know, a horrific scene. And credit to that dad, quick thinking to say, hey, I want to get my kids to safety and I want to protect their innocence as well. I think Chris Minns actually spoke about this. Chris Minns, of course, had been overseas, about to take a holiday. He immediately flew straight back to Sydney, and he spoke about that very scene we just watched. Have a listen.
I've seen some of the images of dads walking their kids out of the shopping centre, shielding their eyes, and you'd never think that you have to go through that in 2024 in a mainstream shopping centre on the first day of school holidays. And I'm devastated that those families and those kids have had to grow up so quickly. All I can say to them is that this city and this state is strong. There are wonderful people within it, and you'll need to look no further than Inspector Amy Scott.
And credit where credit's due, Chris Minns' leadership to fly back here immediately. But I mean, he makes a good point that there's a loss of innocence now among these children. And if you look carefully at some of the CCTV vision, which we've got, of little children with their mums and dads, and in this particular scene that you can see here, you've got people just standing around waiting, and then there's the attacker as he runs in on a rampage, running in. The vision actually will show in a second. Well, we might not actually have that vision, but I mean, he was on a rampage. You can see that person ducking, weaving, trying to get away from him, and actually falls over. And this is the father who, as the distress is going on in the background, this father and his little child right there buying a drink, seeing what's going on. Then he goes to pick his child up and races into Cotton On to shield the child. I mean, how frightening. As a father, you're a father yourself, how frightening would that be?
It would be absolutely terrifying, and thank God that child was removed before, as we saw, the attacker runs past and then followed by the police. But I mean, you talk about the loss of innocence. How do you explain this to your children when we can't comprehend it ourselves?
No.
I mean, we're still trying to sit here, trying to work out what on earth happened, what was the motivation. We'll talk a little bit later about some of this person's health issues.
Yeah.
But as I said, adults can't fathom what has happened. So God knows how you... I mean, my boys are 19 years old.
Yeah.
But trying to explain this to little kids who witness horrific things would just be... beyond anyone's...
It's beyond. And we even saw children today going to the scene, laying flowers with their mum and dad. And that in itself just brings a tear to your eye. But the outpouring of grief, James, I mean, this hasn't just impacted the victims' families. It has impacted all of Sydney, all of Australia and all of the world. And we saw earlier Anthony Albanese alongside the Premier, Chris Minns, as well as other local MPs going to lay their condolences. But you can see there just the sheer amount of flowers that... people are upset that it's a real outpouring of grief. I mean, it's just generally stunned everyone. And we heard as well from the Prime Minister earlier today expressing his condolences.
There should have been a normal shift. Shoppers peacefully going about their lives. And yet for these Australians, their first instinct in the face of danger was to help someone else. That is what we hold on to tonight as Australians. That's confirmation of who we are. Brave, strong, together.
Well, let's talk about what we know concerning the killer, 40-year-old Joel Couchy. He came to New South Wales last month from Queensland and was believed to be from the Brisbane Toowoomba area. He's got a history of mental health issues. They say that from about the age of 17, he was diagnosed with mental health issues, schizophrenia. They also say that he's got a history of drug use, specifically meth and psychedelic drugs, which I think is an interesting conversation that we ought to have in the weeks ahead. Not right now, but at some point we need to talk about the influence of drugs in situations like this. You know, the explanation is, well, he was mad, but it's kind of a circular argument, isn't it? Because you say, well, the reason he did it was he was mad, but then why was he mad? And so it gets difficult to explain these things. But clearly, mental health was the issue. It wasn't a terror-related incident. Thank God for that.
Thank goodness for that. And look, this is the issue, James, I think, with when you say, OK, well, it was a mental health incident. The term mental health is extremely broad. OK, so right now, when this first broke, you've got a situation where speculation was rife, right? People were asking, who is this bloke? What is he doing? What's his background? What's his history? OK? Now, mental health is a broad term. It could mean depression. It could mean anxiety. Now, in this case, we've only just found out this afternoon that perhaps schizophrenia is involved, which maybe you could say, OK, well, that explains perhaps some of what we saw yesterday. I think it was quite tragic that Queensland Police revealed this afternoon that it was actually this man's parents who contacted police after they saw the vision on CCTV footage. They've actually called police and said, we think that this might be our son. He has a history of mental health problems. No one can even imagine what that family is going through as well. But this is what Queensland Police said this morning.
Whilst the investigations are in their infancy and we're still conducting thorough investigations to assist New South Wales, I can say that the man has never been arrested by police in Queensland, nor has he been charged with any criminal offence. We believe he has been sleeping in a vehicle or backpacks according to the family's information, understanding that the family do not have regular contact with their son. It is periodic contact where he may respond to a text message.
As you said, Danica, it was the family of the killer who contacted police. They put out a statement saying that they were devastated by what had happened. They further said that they were thinking of and praying for the victims. And they also said they were thinking of and praying for the police officer who shot dead their son, saying that she did what she needed to do. They bore no ill will, and they hoped that she would be okay. Yeah, under the circumstances, I think that was a very powerful and strong statement from that family. We're also, James, starting to hear a little bit more about this killer. Now, the Daily Telegraph is reporting that he had a fixation with knives and that his parents were so concerned that they previously took implements away from him. But one of the most startling revelations that has been revealed this afternoon was that Joel Couchy was actually advertising his services online as a male escort. Now, I don't know whether this was a case of he'd just moved here to Sydney, he was looking for money and he was advertising his services online, but it certainly adds to this narrative that this man has a whole history that police will now have to go through piece by piece to try and piece together a motive and what led him to go on this murderous rampage. Yeah, clearly he was a very strange individual, and people have testified to that fact. A woman who dated him twice in Toowoomba, who met him at church and took him on a couple of dates, or he took her rather, and she said he was just quote unquote weird. The people at the knife shop said he was just very odd and had this sort of blank demeanour. The advertising on escort sites, advertising his services, is just strange. The more we find out about this person, the more strange the whole situation becomes. In the middle of all of this, of course, Channel 7 identified, would you believe this, the wrong person as the knife-wielding murderer. On the network's official 7 News Australia YouTube account, the channel published a report with a caption underneath that wrongly named Benjamin Cohen as the offender. Now, Benjamin Cohen is a first-year university student, a Jewish young person who lives in East Sydney. The video was online for more than an hour and attracted thousands of views. Turns out, of course, Benjamin Cohen had nothing to do with the crimes whatsoever. The 7 spokesperson said it was human error. The mistake was rectified and 7 sincerely apologised for the error. Have a listen now to Benjamin Cohen talking about how upsetting it was for him to be identified as the killer.
It's extremely disappointing to me to see people mindlessly propagating misinformation like this without even the slightest thought put into fact-checking. But what's even more disappointing to me is a major news network doing this, using my name, without waiting for a statement from the police to verify this, or going out to try verify it themselves. This whole incident has been highly distressing and disappointing for myself and my family.
James, this is extraordinary. That poor man has had his life turned upside down in just a matter of hours. It doesn't matter if you're at the top of Channel 7 or even a junior. Somebody needs to be cautioned or sacked over such a horrific incident, but also not to mention the fact that Cohen is a common Jewish name. So while Twitter was going rife with conspiracy theories about what was going on yesterday in this shopping centre, this poor man's name was being tarnished by a lot of very influential people on social media who were calling out a lot of making anti-Semitic names. Horrific, absolutely horrific. And here was David Adler from the Australian Jewish Association on how indicative this is of anti-Semitic conspiracy theories that we are indeed seeing thrown around at the moment.
And it was picked up, as you say, by mainstream media, Channel 7. And the name that was given falsely, it was entirely fake news, to the perpetrator was Benjamin Cohen. And there is a real Benjamin Cohen. His name is indeed trending on Twitter, and he's been in touch with us and said, my name's Ben Cohen. I am currently trending on several social media platforms following a false accusation that I am the attacker. And then he says, I've heard that you're coming onto Sky News, and I'd love for you to bring up this false accusation, how it is used to propel anti-Semitism and destroy my name in the process.
Absolutely unbelievable. Now, of course, before Channel 7 wrongly reported this, as you said, it was trending and going viral on social media Saturday night. And the glee with which people were tweeting, we've found the killer, we've identified him,
he's Jewish. He's Jewish.
Was actually quite sinister. People were delighting in the fact that they could blame a Jew for something. And I mean, I saw those tweets and immediately thought, it just doesn't make sense. And I think that's a lesson with social media. Trust your gut instinct. When something seems off, good chance.
Yeah, but
probably
also wait for official police confirmation. It's so wrong to jump the gun, and this is a prime example of why you should never. But James, look, we mentioned the victims earlier on. There's 6 victims in this tragedy, and I think we should take a moment now to remember those who have died. Ashley Good was a new mum in the prime of her life, enjoying a day out at busy Westfield Bondi Junction with her 9-month-old girl. As she pushed little Harriet in a pram through the centre, the pair would be struck by dreadful misfortune, as a knife-wielding stranger, now identified as Joel Couchy, was on a killing spree.
I heard the loudest scream I've ever heard in my life, and someone just dropped to the floor and everybody just started running towards me.
Their lives changed in an instant. Couchy callously stabbed the infant, then turned the knife on the mother. Protecting her baby until the very end, Ashley Good thrust little Harriet into the arms of strangers. These 2 hero brothers saved the child.
I got stabbed and Mum come over with the baby and threw it at me and was holding the baby. I was holding the baby and trying to compress the baby, and same with the mother, trying to compress the blood from stopping and calling ambulance and police.
The 38-year-old first-time mum was rushed to St Vincent's Hospital but died from her injuries. Her baby will now grow up without a mother, her family left in shock and grieving. In a statement, they say, "Today we are reeling from the terrible loss of Ashley, a beautiful mother, daughter, sister, partner, friend, all-round outstanding human, and so much more." And on little Harriet, we can report that after hours of surgery yesterday, our baby is currently doing well.
Whether you know the individuals who've been killed or not, you're grieving today. And the entire state will have to get behind those families in the days ahead as they recover and they go through the inevitable grief associated with such a horrifying event.
The daughter of millionaire businessman John Singleton has been identified among the victims. 25-year-old Dawn Singleton was an e-commerce assistant at a fashion boutique and was meant to be getting married in the coming months. Her best friend Jade O'Connor wrote on Facebook, "Dawn, I should be writing your wedding speech. Instead, I sit here sobbing, coming to terms with how life isn't fair, that you are no longer here."
Tragically, we saw a loss of life, and people will be grieving for loved ones today.
Architect and mother of 2 Jade Young also died during the frenzied attack, and 55-year-old Pakria Dacia. 2 victims have been identified as on-duty Westfield security guards. One of them, Faraz Tahir, a 30-year-old refugee who came to Australia only a year ago.
It may be some time before we can identify all of the victims because some family members do not reside in Australia.
12 women were either killed or critically injured in the stabbing spree. As inquiries continue, the grief is being felt by those who knew the victims and those who didn't. Their loss has reverberated across the state, Australia and the world as we come to grips with the tragedy. So we now know the identities of 5 of the 6 victims. James, and Ashley Good's last selfless act to protect her own baby. Her baby is stabbed, she's stabbed. She then thrusts the baby over to those hero brothers, those 2 hero brothers who saved the life of little Harriet. As she took her final breath, she fought for her baby until the very end. I mean, you just can't even comprehend that.
Just watching that package that you put together is just heartbreaking. I mean, I'm sitting here and I've seen it before, but watching it again, it's just incredibly devastating where you've got, you know, obviously that little girl. Thank God that baby looks like she will survive and pull through, but will never have her mum.
Growing up without a mother.
John Singleton's daughter who's about to be married. I mean, and you could just go on and every single one of those families. I mean, you just, how do you ever recover from something like that?
No, you can't. And as I mentioned there as well, 12 women were attacked by this killer. Now, it is going to form a line of inquiry whether or not he was deliberately targeting women. We certainly don't know. The statistics suggest that perhaps he was. A number of eyewitnesses have said that he was running after women as opposed to men. We know, though, that one male security guard has died. But, James, it will now form part of an investigation whether that is the case or not.
And they've got to investigate every
of course they do.
avenue, right? I mean, maybe he was targeting women. Maybe just women are an easier target because they're not as strong, less able to fight back.
Yeah.
And the guy's clearly a coward. I mean, he's stabbing babies. So, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, hearts go out to all the families involved, and our thoughts and prayers are certainly with you.